of Carlos Sebastían Figueroa, our doctoral candidate in education of the English language teaching education emphasis. On behalf of the Doctorado Interinstitucional en Educación, and as a professor of the emphasis, I would like to congratulate Sebastían for having reached this important stage and for sharing with the audience his work, waiving teacher identities, and post-structural approach to narratives in bilingual science education. I would also like to highlight the work of his advisors and his panel of examiners for their contributions to Sebastían's work and life. So let's start by introducing our dear Sebastían. Sebastían has a bachelor's degree in biology from the Universidad Pedagógica Nacional, and he also holds a master's degree in communication and education from the Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas. Now I'm pleased to introduce to you Sebastían Tesis advisors, Dr. Carmen Helena Guerrero Nieto, and Dr. Nathanael Rudolph as his co-advisor. Dr. Carmen Helena Guerrero holds a PhD in second language acquisition and teaching, and she is a professor and a researcher of the Doctoral Interinstitucional en Educación en la Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas. Sebastían Tesis co-advisor is Dr. Nathanael Rudolph, who has a PhD in curriculum and instruction, and he is an associate professor of sociolinguistics and language education at Kinde University, Osaka, Japan. Sebastían has a distinguished panel of examiners. So let's start by the international examiner, Dr. Kevin C. Carroll. He is a PhD in language, reading, and culture from the Universidad of Arizona, and a professional researcher at the Universidad de Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras campus. Our national examiner, Dr. Nelly Sierra Ospina, she is a PhD in education and an associate professor and researcher at the School of Languages as coordinator of the English Articulation Program at the University of Antioquia. And last but not least, the host examiner, Dr. Harold Castañeda Peña, who holds a PhD in education. He is a professor and a researcher of the Doctoral Interinstitucional en Educación en la Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas. Well, after these important presentations, I will proceed to explain the agenda of the session. Sebastían, you will have 40 minutes to present your doctoral, your dissertation defense with 5 minutes left. I will interrupt you, Sebastían, to let you know that there is time for you to wrap up. After that, each examiner will have 10 minutes each to make comments, questions, or suggestions. I will be here to assist you guys to let you know when you have 3 minutes left for you to finish your intervention. By protocol, the international examiner will be the first to speak, then the national examiner, and finally, our local host examiner. When all the examiners have spoken, Sebastían, you will have 30 minutes to be exact to respond your questions and to react to comments. Finally, I will allow a space that is optional for Dr. Carmen Helena and Nathanael to say a few words. When the times for the deliberation comes, the panel of examiners will go to a separate room, and later the host examiner, together with the panel of examiners, will join this room again to read the official assessment statement and close the session. So, Sebastían, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm going to set my timer and remember.
Okay.
I'm going to let you know when the time has come to finish. Okay, whenever you're ready, you can start.
Okay, I'm gonna time it myself too. So 1, 2, and 3. Let's go. Okay. Today I'm gonna share with you my defense of my dissertation. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to my panel, the juries, for reading my ideas and allow me today present Thank you to Nathanael. Thank you to Carmen, Helena, Doctor, for all the company in this process. The title of my proposal is Weight and Teacher Identities, a post-structural approach to narrative in bilingual science teachers by me, Sebastían Figueroa, Salamanca. My thesis advisor is Dr. Carmen Elena Guerrero, and my co-advisor is Nathanael Rudolph, PhD. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to talk about identities. So the first thing I have to do is talk about my own identity. And for doing that, I'm going to start with the locus of enunciation. In the locus of enunciation, the first thing I have to say is I'm a coffee lover. And it's something that weighs all my relations is the coffee time. And this is part of it's a strong part of my rationale in the dissertation. And then I'm a music lover. Here I'm with my dad. I was with my dad in Rolling Stones concert. He taught me rock and roll and salsa music, and that allows me to love music now. I'm a traveler. In the first moment, I was solo traveler, but then I discovered that sharing these travels with the people you love is another kind of experience. So that's my mom. We were in Peru in the mountain Seven Colors. I'm a science lover, and that's very crucial in this dissertation and this research I did, because in the picture you can see a turtle and some butterflies drinking its tears as a source of sodium. So I found these biological processes, beautiful things to share with all people that is around me. I'm a learner. There I'm with my dearest Dr. Carmen Elena Guerrero. I call her CH, and we spent a lot of times and a lot of afternoons in coffee shops talking and discussing the ideas I'm going to share today. I'm sharing today. I'm a third athlete. I'm a third cyclist, and that gives me the possibility to re-understand the territory using my bicycles to re-understand how people experience their own territories. I had the opportunity to cycle in other countries in my country, so that's a picture, and it's something that I can share with my dad too. All this gives me a lot of tools for being teacher. That's a picture with my kids the last year. I try to. I'm doing this part of my life, this doctoral program. I'm finished this for try to inspire them as a professionals and love for education. Sorry, I forgot. I'm gonna use Spanish and English in this presentation. The problematization of my research has to do with bilingual science, bilingual education in Colombia. I go to Guerrero 2008 and Mejia 2009. Those are authors trying to criticize the use of bilingual term in Colombia. And one of their findings is the bilingualism is understood just the use of English and sometimes maybe the use of Spanish. But we are a monolingual country in Spanish. We have a lot of we have different languages, indigenous languages, but those languages are the mother tongues in their territories. So I struggled with my science teacher identity because when I finished my undergraduate, I was looking for a job, and the only possibilities I had was being bilingual science teacher. But I start questioning myself because in the university, in my educational educational program, we never thought about teach science using English or teach science using another languages. So that's one point I start making questions. Then I choose narrative research as my methodology because I'm not looking for a truth. And here it's important to say something that Gabriel García Márquez points out. La vida no es lo que uno vivió, es lo que uno recuerda y cómo recuerda para contarlo. So I'm not looking for the facts, I'm not looking for the exactly events. I'm looking for how my participants narrate their own stories and narrate their own identities. So that's crucial. And for doing that, I approach to the post-structural thinking. It gives me the possibility of challenging the borders, make discussions between different fields, and recognize the identities as something dynamic. As I told you, I review 26 programs for science teachers in Colombian universities, and at least just two has some contents in English. So there is a gap there. How how science teacher become bilingual science teacher in Colombia? Because there are a lots of schools, prefect schools, trying to teach the science contents using bilingualism. I start facing challenges in bilingual science teaching. The first thing I said, like, my or students, they just speak Spanish, and we try to teach and using English, but the use of Spanish is not allowed in some institutions. So there is bilingualism there. Then in my literature review and the profiling I did, I found the gap in research. I'm going to talk about that in the next slides. And then I wave the research question. My research question is, how do science teachers who have taught bilingually narrate their journeys through identity trails? My main objective is to narrate the journey through the identity trails of science teachers who have taught bilingually. And I have two specifics. The first one is to map the continuities and discontinuities in the experience of science teachers who have taught bilingually through narratives. And my second is to uncover the challenges that bilingual science teachers face in the construction of their identities in their teaching practice. I did write a research profiling, looking for what? I was looking for the trends and the gaps in literature. So I did like the research phrase, and I put it into the databases, Taylor and Francis and Scopus, and I found like 250 articles. Then I start reading those articles, and I select 50 articles, looking for trends in research about my topic. The first thing I found that is some invisibilization of the subject in the bilingualism process. Most of the articles try to explore how it's implemented bilingualism in different countries in the world, but and few others, try to look for some aspects of the identity of the science teacher, like representations, perceptions, opinions, but not the identity itself. So I found the gap. The gap is there is not enough research about bilingual science teacher identities in the world. So some others of these articles deals with the how implement English as a method of instruction and clear. So the gap is, for me, was clear in that moment. Then I waived my theoretical discussion. My theoretical discussion, I said discussion because I'm not working with a straight frameworks. I'm not working with a fixed frameworks. I see my research, my dissertation as a living thing with the process of feedback. So the first discussion I did was identities in motion, the becoming of science teachers in bilingual territories. I went to Davis and Jarret, De Los and Guattari and Butler for saying that identity in my research, it's not something fixed. It's something that the subject can deconstruct, reconstruct, or reshape any moment. It depends of their experiences and how they remember those experiences and how and the decisions they made about their own journey. I go to the process of becoming, developed by Deleuze and Guattari. I'm saying that we are not finished processes. We are just in the process of becoming. And then I go to the bilingualism paradox, tensions between science teaching and English in the Colombian context. I went to Guerrero, de Mejia, Sigmund, and Gagel for saying that bilingualism in Colombia, at least, is just understood in the majority of population as a use of English, even no use of other Western languages like Italian, Portuguese, or French. Is the most of the population try to become bilingual in English. So the next discussion is ways to teach bilingually. I approach to this concept of teach bilingually. But in our country, bilingualism is quite different because the majority of our population speaks just Spanish. Then I waved like a discussion of the post-structural thinking, exploring the kaleidoscopic nature of identity. I went to Butler, Hall, Deleuze and Guattari, Baba, and Foucault. And this post-structural thinking allows me to approach to the stories of my participant in a very open way, trying to challenge the borders and make possible discussions between other fields. I remember you, I'm a science teacher, I'm a science lover, so I include that, but not with a purpose, because that emerged from the data. So when I approach with the post-structural thinking, I said like, I'm gonna listen the data. I'm gonna listen the data once want to tell. Then something that emerged from the data was power and resistance, voices from the bilingual classroom. And this emerged from the data because when I start reading the stories of my participants, I identify that they have some agency about being bilingual science teacher. So that concept emerged from the data, and that's the process I was telling you that the cell does the feedback between different parts of the cell, and how can emerge and could emerge different things in that process. I went to Foucault, Saint-Pierre, and Val, McClure, and the Lauritis. Then I wave a discussion about continuities and discontinuities, fragments of identity and motion, but I want to clarify here that there are no opposite. It looks like there are counterparts, but there are not counterparts. They have very complex relation between what it means a continuity, because a continuity allows to some of my participants face a discontinuity, and in some points discontinuities become continuities. So it has very complex relation as a life, as a process. I went to Godson, Brisman, Connolly, and Claudine, Mockler, Ackerman, and Mejia. My methodological discussion, as I told you, my research is a narrative study by Claudine and Connolly and Risman. It allows me to approach to the stories of my participants, and we have like this freedom of tell the story in the way they want to tell the story. I went to narrative post-structural approach by Foucault and Brisman for having this kind of freedom to challenge the borders. And that something that appeared after reading the stories was this theme: biological metaphors, life interpreting teachers' lives by like I use a word of Lakoff and Johnson that it's called thinking with a theory. And when I was reading the stories of my participants, I start discovering this passion for science, obviously because they are science teachers, and how they embrace this science, love for science. And I decide to create biological metaphors for as another layer of interpretation of their stories. So I'm gonna expand these ideas because this is part of the methodological discussion, but it's part of the findings too. I'm going to describe the methods and data collection, data collection quotation marks, because it's not data collection. There are stories, there are human stories. It's not data. I have like 3 open dialogues with each participant. I have 3 participants. Each open dialogue, each encounter was like approximately like 40 minutes. Me as researcher, I have this theoretical treatment with them. I start sharing my own experiences, my opinions, my thoughts about this thing of being bilingual science teacher. That's why it's researcher in quotation marks, because I was so involved in that. Then I asked for permission, obviously, to record the encounters. And then I decide to transcribe the recordings. I did like a closer reading of transcriptions, and then with my participants, we create the narratives. Obviously, with participant involvement, because they always say like, I want this part here, or I want this part in the beginning. So they decide that. The participant selection has 3 points for developing. The first one was experience as a science teacher in bilingual context. I'm not looking for a truth. I'm trying to explore and trying to narrate their journeys through of this in this process of being bilingual science teacher. So I just work with three stories. Second, the diversity of experience constitutes a crucial component of this group. I believe even in the same situation, they make different decisions. They have different the perspectives. So each participant contributes a unique perspective. The selection of the selection of participants followed a collaborative approach. I start talking with my friends about the ideas I had in the doctoral in my research, and they contact me with another friends, and they contact me with the teachers I select for this this research. And the first moment, I asked for my participants to make like a self-description in their own voice. Ingrid said, I'm Ingrid, a warrior woman who has blessed with incredible opportunities and faced challenges that have paved the way for victories. Angie, I'm not using the real names, and I changed the names for saving her original data. I'm Angie, I hold a degree in chemistry. I work in a couple of small schools in Bogota, covering maternity leaves. And Lorena says, I'm Lorena. Ever since I was a child, my parents instilled in me a curiosity and a passion for understanding how the world operates. In this part, I'm gonna present the findings and discussions I weighed in this journey. The first finding, and it's part of the methodological part too, is biological metaphors, life interpreting teacher's life. I use metaphors as interpretative devices to expand narratives beyond the literal meaning. And why I'm doing that? Because I'm a science teacher, I'm a science lover, and my participants, when we were talking, for them, science is the key, is the most important thing they could teach. So I start waving this idea of being bilingual science teacher is being science teacher, but using another resources for teaching. I try to create new territories of meanings for science teachers in bilingual context. These metaphors emerge originally from teachers' own epistemological territory. I'm gonna explain this in Spanish. Aquí lo importante de las historias, o algo muy importante en las historias de los participantes, fue que mostraban siempre amor por la ciencia y era un discurso muy recurrente. Estas metáforas biológicas no emergen a priori, es decir, yo no fui con las metáforas biológicas a describir o a interpretar las historias de mis participantes. Por el contrario, fueron las historias de los participantes las que pedían algo de entendimiento a través de metáforas biológicas. So biological metaphors reveal the dynamic and adaptive nature of identity in bilingual context. Here I understood something, that identity or identities is very dynamic thing, and life as a biological process is very, very dynamic too. So I start understanding that maybe we can describe or we can explore how is some part of the stories using biological concepts becoming in metaphors. So there is nothing more dynamic than life itself, and perhaps like organism, its in constant adaptation or interpretation must also remain open to new possibilities of meaning. This is just one interpretation, and I want to clarify that because maybe even me, if I take my research in 5 years, I'm gonna create another possible meanings of these stories. So here I try to say that this is just one view of of those stories, and I have to clarify another thing. When I'm talking about their identities, I'm talking about just one part of their lives. I'm not a totalizer in that when I'm trying to describe their identities. I'm going to start with Angie and her narrative. I select some parts of her narrative. The first thing she said is what has always been in my head is science, and what drives me is science. I select that because it's something very related with my decision of waving metaphors. Then she said, I have to work through my entire degree. I had to do all my students during the week so I could work on weekends. She has this very passion for looking very economic opportunities, and that's something crucial in her story. And then she said, "I thought it's not it's not right that I invest 5 years of my life to earn the same as I do selling clothes while working few days." She has this conflict between being science teacher in Colombia or not being science teacher in Colombia, and she reflects about the bilingual process. I'm doing two jobs, teaching science and teaching English. So she started recognizing that some part of her identity is becoming to language teacher for being involved in this thing of being bilingual science teacher. I look for the continuities and discontinuities, and I want to clarify that I look for the continuities and discontinuities, but without agenda. I let the data, the stories, tell me what is a continuity and what is a discontinuity, because these discontinuities and continuities are not the same for all my participants. Continuities, passion for chemistry and sciences, constant research for better economic opportunities, adaptability and continuous learning, persistent and pursuing goals. And it's curious how these continuities allowed her to face the discontinuities. And it's curious how some of those discontinuities become continuities. And the discontinuities I explored in her story: transition from monolingual to bilingual teaching, change in teaching perception, gap between expectations and reality in bilingual teaching, identity transformation, and cultural and linguistic shock. Then, when I was reading her story, I was thinking like, okay, which process in nature could expand her story and given another possible meanings. And I wave this metaphor, the butterfly effect in education: small changes, greater transformations. And I go to the concept to metamorphosis for expand the ideas of her story. Metamorphosis, Moran defines metamorphosis as a more or less abrupt change in the form of or the structure of an animal body, accompanied by changes in habitat and or behavior. So I'm trying to say that she really transformed her identity, but I'm doing this in another language, in the language of sciences. I'm not trying to explain that. I'm just trying to put another way, another layer of interpretation. And this identity deconstructs and reconstructs using persistent elements as a basis of transformation. The things I explored that were the continuities. In this metaphor, it's called DNA. We find continuities that act as a persistent DNA of Angie's identities. And this DNA doesn't define her. This DNA allows her to face the challenges in their environments of being as a bilingual science teacher. So I go to the concept of growth hormones to explain that these growth hormones are the hormones that guides the cell's reorganization, and the change in teaching perception and the cultural linguistic shock that Angie experienced are other discontinuities that act as a metamorphic stress in her transformation. She changed, but she changed not for changing. Ella cambió porque tenía un estrés metamórfico que enfrentar. Y ese estrés metamórfico lo navegó a través de sus continuidades, que en la metáfora es su ADN. I faced the reality I faced the reality that I didn't understand anything. I didn't know any English, she said in the first moment. But she integrates her scientific knowledge with her new linguistic skills, creating a hybrid and adaptive teaching identity. However, it's a challenge. Each professional mold contributes to her growth and adaptation. And this concept of the mold is very important, because something that she believes she leaves behind is something that comes back, and she creates a new identity through that. Angie's career as adaptation that allowed her to occupy different educational niches. Here I'm going to explain this in Spanish. Cuando un organismo metamorfosea o cambia, esa metamorfosis no solo es una gran ventaja porque le permite ocupar diferentes nichos o diferentes micro nichos. Por ejemplo, lo que come la mariposa adulta no es lo mismo que come la larva. Y eso pasa también, that's happening in her story. She started exploring new educational niches. So metamorphosis, as described by Werner, is a process where organisms transform their morphology, physiology, and behavior to take advantage of different resources in different distinct habitats. That's what I was saying. Then I'm gonna introduce Lorena. Lorena, I take some parts of her story too. She said, I was very afraid to look for a job in a bilingual school. When we were talking about this, I said the same thing. I was very afraid of looking a job as bilingual teacher. But she said, like, I always thought that one thing is to know English and another very different thing is to teach science in English. In the first moment of her first interview, she said, I was very honest with him. I told him, well, I know how to maintain a conversation with the vocabulary I have, but I feel deep down what I need the vocabulary in science. And she said, and this story is different because she started making a breakdown this dichotomy of being science teacher and using English because she has another pedagogical resources for her transformation. What I do is that I dance with them, I sing with them, I show them, I give them examples, I come here and I start doing the dynamics with them. Then who are them? Her students. For me, and I take this another part. For me, as a science teacher, science is more important to me. But I believe I can have the tools for do it in a very well in English. She started becoming in this thing of being science teacher. Something that I have to point out in her story is that in her school it wasn't allowed to speak Spanish, and she started struggling without some institutional instructions like if you speak Spanish, I'm gonna put you a red card or yellow card. And she said she makes like this agency trying to know using that and trying to protect the learning of her students. So the continuities I explore in her story is linguistic performancivity and construction of teacher identity, narratives of resistance and adaptation, agency and subjectivity in restrictive educational context, multimodality in bilingual science teacher knowledge construction. These continuities, we explore micropolitics of power in bilingual classroom. That's this part. If you remember when I was talking about power and resistance, this story is the story that comes from that discussion in the theoretical framework. The construction of the Spanish-English dichotomy, gap between expectation and reality in bilingual teaching, temporally and narrative in teaching experience, and cultural and linguistic shock. So when I was thinking in her story, I said like, okay, here's something beautiful. And I said like, okay, let's use the concept of homeostasis. And I title this a metaphor, homeostatic balance, the dance of a bilingual teacher. Homeostasis es el proceso mediante el cual un organismo se hace un equilibrio con todo lo que está pasando a su alrededor. Y ese equilibrio que hace el organismo lo hace para mantenerse vivo. So, like a body struggling to maintain its temperature in a changing environment, her identity pulsates in a delicate dance between the ice institutional demands and the warmth of her pedagogical passion. And this is something, it's a powerful idea I wave with her story. Like a white blood cells, Lorena adapts to protect her students' learning. And when I'm saying white blood cells son los glóbulos blancos, es el sistema de defensa del cuerpo, que es un proceso netamente de homeostasis. pero ella no lo hace para estar viva a ella, lo hace para proteger el aprendizaje de sus estudiantes. So she's very commitment with the learning of her students. This homeostatic dance of resistance and adaptation, it's not a simple survival mechanism. It is a biological symphony where each note is a pedagogical decision. She said, like, una cosa es saber inglés, Lorena from the nucleus of her experience, y otra cosa muy diferente es enseñar ciencias en inglés. In this comparison, beats the vision of a cell that has learned to adapt a new medium. That's the metaphor I wave for her. And final, but not less important, is Ingrid and her narrative. Ingrid, she said, I take some fragments of her story too. When I was little, I used to play teacher with my cousins instead of using stuffed animals as a student. She reveals her decision for being a teacher. It was a huge challenge for me because I always been very sheltered, and suddenly I was in a country on the other side of the world with a different language, doing completely different things. She was in Australia, and she started struggling the use of English, not for teaching, just for learning. And she did this commitment with her students, and she tells her, like, as I tell my students, you have to keep growing professionally, make the most of your time to organize yourself, and never stop learning. And she reflects on being bilingual. Having an informal conversation with someone is one thing. You can make mistakes because you are not really explaining anything to anyone. But it's completely different when you have to teach. The continuities and discontinuities I explore in her stories, identity and professional transformation, resilience, and this word is very important for the next part, resilience and educational persistence, institutional instruction and contracts, professional agency and autonomy. And discontinuities, identity and professional transformation, socioeconomic mobility and educational opportunity, pedagogical evolution in bilingual context, and professional agency and autonomy. The narrative I weigh for her is I'm using the ecological resilience as a metaphor and what it means, ecological resilience. I'm going to expand my thinking in Spanish here. Un ecosistema que tiene resiliencia es capaz de absorber los cambios, incluso los cambios negativos que ocurren dentro del ecosistema. Por ejemplo, cuando en el ejemplo de la tortuga, cuando la tortuga sale del agua, hay unas presiones en sus músculos que la hacen llorar, y eso que la hizo llorar, el ecosistema lo toma como una fuente de sodio, y las mariposas van a buscar ese sodio en sus lágrimas. Una idea tremendamente hermosa. And her story, she did the same thing. She is very resilient in this thing of being bilingual science teacher. She absorbs the changes in her story. This offers an enriching analytical framework for understanding the complex dynamics of identity development in bilingual science teaching. Ingrid's narrative embodies the ecological resilience where challenges and changes are not simply overcome to return a previous state. She doesn't come back to the previous state. She transforms herself with the changes she faces. When Ingrid expressed, ahorita me siento más confiada, ya ahora dicto clases en tercero y en cuarto y en quinto, 1 hora en tercero, en cuarto y 2 horas en quinto. She says that she appropriates the changes that she were experiencing. Cuando hablamos de resiliencia ecológica o de un ecosistema, hablamos de algo que se llama las especies clave, keystone species. And the keystone species are those that maintain all the equilibrium in the ecosystem. And these keystone species could be the continuities in her story. In Ingrid's case, the ecological function of identity as a teacher include her passion for science and her commitment for continuous learning. The discontinuities in Ingrid's narrative can be seen as psychological disturbances or changes that the system stability, but also offer opportunities for reorganization and growth. Ecological system provide stability and continuity even as it navigates in a significant tensions This performativity manifests a continuous process of negotiation between multiple discourses and identities. And finally, from a post-structural perspective, this metaphor illuminates how the science teacher identity demonstrates remarkable adaptability and persisted through various educational transitions. I have 5 minutes, I believe.
5 minutes left. Perfect
Okay.
time.
It's perfect. Then I created like the final metaphor using the concept of evolution and phylogenetics. And in this discussion, I start with saying that in the tree of teaching life, Darwin in 1859, the stories of Ingrid, Lorena, and Angie unfold the phylogenetic branches reaching toward the light. Here it's important to clarify that I'm not trying to express their identities using science. I'm trying to metaforizar sus historias usando ciencias. ¿Por qué? Porque la evolución no es un proceso lineal, isn't a linear process. Por el contrario, es como un organismo con sus continuidades, or DNA, could express different responses in a same conditions. I start this presentation saying that my participants had made different decisions and they experience different things in the same situations. So, por ejemplo, es algo que, por ejemplo, nos hace a nosotros como colombianos uno de los países más megadiversos, biodiversos del mundo. Las diferentes respuestas que tienen los organismos frente a los mismos cambios. Teachers don't simply adapt to bilingual environments. They become new versions of themselves. And like species that colonize new territories and develop unique adaptations, the interaction of those biological metaphors reveal the deeply transformative nature of becoming a bilingual science teacher. I'm using this metaphor for saying that an identity and life, they share this thing of being very dynamic. It's following its own adaptive gradient in a complete bilingual educational canopy. Like Darwin contemplating the adaptive gradation of finches in the Galapagos, will observe how these three teachers have evolved from a common ancestor. What is the common ancestor? Primordial passion for science teaching. Their paths reveal not only evolutionary innovations, complete transformations, homeostasis, and ecological resistance. And this framework helped us to understand why there can be not single correct way to teach science bilingual. Just a biological evolution produced multiple success adaptations to similar environments and challenges. We as human beings, we are in the same level of success that the bacteria or viruses or another living things. So there is no just one way of being success in biological terms, and I try to say that in the identities of my participants. And I want to finish with what aspect of our identity remains immutable while others transform radically. I want to thank you for listening to my ideas. I want to thank you deeply to Nathanael for being with me out this process since my internship. I want to thank to my dear Carmen and Helena. I want to thank you to Carroll for his words, to Pilar for always giving me her words too. And I want to thank you to Dr. Nelly and Dr. Kevin for reading my ideas and taking in a very serious way. And I finished, and that's all.
Thank you, Sebastían, for your presentation. It's been really a pleasure to listen to you. Also for reminding us of dormant biology concepts while introducing your bilingual biology teachers. Now let's move on to the examiner's intervention. So the first who takes the floor is Dr. Carroll. You have 10 minutes for your questions, reactions, or comments.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you. First, thanks for the invite. It's a pleasure to be part of this process and see kind of how you guys do it. your institution, a little bit different, the process, the University of Puerto Rico. I also wanted to thank Sebastían for giving me a review of some of these key biology terms. I ended up having to look up a lot of these words in English. I can't remember taking biology 101 even at the university. So that was a nice refresher on some key science terms. My comments and questions. Well, first, I really appreciated the focus on bilingual science teacher identity. I think right from the very beginning, I was intrigued by the ambitions of your study. As you said, there's this major gap in the literature, and particularly when it comes to Spanish-speaking countries. There's too much, or too often, right? In the Americas, we look to research in the United States, either US-based researchers or research that's happening in the United States, even when our contexts in Latin America look nothing like the context in the United States. And so I think I really applaud this research. I think the research that you're doing, Sebastían, along with the research of your colleagues, your professors, your mentors in Colombia really goes a long way to allow us to look beyond US based research. And that's really what we need to be doing, because the context in which we teach in, the one that I work in Puerto Rico, is much more similar to a context like Colombia than it is to Miami or Detroit, where I'm at currently, right? It's also very important within the context of teaching English as a second language, and I would say more broadly bilingual education, that we understand the realities of content area teachers, right? These identities of these content area teachers are so important because they play an integral part in the fostering of bilingualism, okay? And so I think, your paper, your dissertation does a really good job in allowing us to better understand these identities, right? It's a complex situation, right? When minority language users, right? So in Colombia, using English, their non-dominant language, to other speakers whose language is also the same language, right? So a Spanish native speaker teaching in English, their non-dominant language, other individuals who know that they know Spanish is a complex endeavor, right? And so it almost takes or requires the teacher to take on a kind of different personality and a different identity. And I think that you document that very well throughout your dissertation. Creating or assuming these different identities can be very challenging. And in our context here in Puerto Rico, English is very much seen as a representative of a colonizer's language, of a language that represents the United States, right? And so regardless of where we are in the world, the languages that we're forced to use in classrooms really are going to impact our identities, but also how our students see them. And they represent these outside forces and power dynamics, regardless of whether we want them to. And I think that your paper and your dissertation talks about that and just the different power dynamics that are at play, which was really important. There are definitely elements of the three participants that content area teachers, not just science teachers, can connect with. I think Angie, Lorena, and Ingrid's story allow us to understand the complexities of teachers teaching in a language that isn't their dominant language, particularly when they share the dominant language of students. And thus, similar to as you stated today, these definitions of bilingualism are not static, but are all, they're always in movement. And similar to your students or similar to your participants, they force us to adapt, right? Similar to these biological principles that you were talking about as well today. In terms of perhaps a little critique of the dissertation, I felt that at points just the sheer multitude of chapters was made the document a little bit fragmented. I thought that that might be perhaps the norm at your institution, but as an outsider, where I'm more used to maybe like an 8 or 9 chapter dissertation being a dissertation with a lot of chapters, right? Traditionally at my institution, they would have 5 or 6. So seeing the multitude of chapters for me felt it was just a little fragmented. It's not a major critique. It was just something that that was it was different for me. I felt, and true to your proposal, that your weaving of these narratives was extremely creative, and the way that you brought in biology and evolution into the document was very creative. It made it to be an entertaining piece. Something that you always kind of kept me kind of guessing what was next, right? And so that was perhaps a very positive element or discourse element to the dissertation. In terms of thinking about questions, when we did your proposal defense many months ago, like AI was not really a thing that we're using on a daily basis, right? I'm really interested, how you see from a methodological standpoint how like AI, artificial intelligence, right, might change, challenge, impact either data collection. I'm not necessarily the teacher identities, right? I think these identities are very personal, and maybe you think that teachers' identities change as a result of AI in the future. But I'm more curious to hear your thoughts when it's your time to talk. So about like what things might you have done differently now, in terms of participants, right? In terms of the amount of participants, in terms of the amount of interviews, right? Like, I'm wondering if that would change at all, given the advances in in technology, right? And particularly AI. And yeah, so those are. I think I'll. I have no idea where I'm at on time. I meant to time myself, but I have no idea.
Perfect timing.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll.
Problem at all.
Thank you.
Let's continue with Dr. Nelly Ospina.
Un second.
Your mic is off, Dr. Ospina. Are you having some
Escuchan. Yeah, I was have my microphone, sorry. Okay. Thank you so much, Sebastían, for your presentation. And I also want to thank you all for inviting me to be part of this process, which was also a great learning experience for me as well. To start also with some of the comments that I wrote in my feedback, I want to emphasize that your dissertation, Sebastían, is a very valuable work because it reflects a very serious and coherent research. And more than that, the reflection process that you reported in all your dissertation, it was very interesting and enriching. It contributes to a topic that has not been widely explored, in particular in our national context. There are some experiences in Colombia regarding teaching content classes in English in particular, in the different levels of education, but there are not like studies regarding the identities of educators in this process. Also, I want to emphasize in particular the methodological approach and the structure of your presentation. In my comments, I also say that sometimes I found like some parts like that were like repetitive, but in general, I do celebrate the way you present your dissertation, because it's like it took like some distance from the traditional scheme of thesis writing and qualitative research. I think it was a very nice experience reading all your dissertation. I want to highlight as well the use of metaphors. Also, I think it was very creative. It was very interesting to read the different concepts and the different metaphors that you use to report and to illustrate the journey of every one of the participants in your study, to show the continuities, discontinuities, and all the challenges and tensions that your participants faced during their experiences teaching science in a foreign language. I also told in my feedback that obviously it contributes to the generation of new knowledge. I think this study could be very significant and could be used as a very interesting input for education policies, in particular for the creation of language policies in these institutions where the administrators or the ones in charge of these institutions decide to teach content classes in a foreign language. Also, the information, I think, that the report in your results also are very meaningful for considering in-service education programs for science educators in these institutions. I have some questions based on the results that you presented. So I'd like you to tell us about, based on your own experience and on this research process, how do you see or how do you think about the use of only English in the classroom in these institutions? And what about translanguaging? How possible do you see translanguaging in these classes, despite the fact that some institutions may force teachers to use only English? Also, you mentioned in your results that bilingual education should be reconceptualized. So how do you think it could be reconceptualized in our context? Well, another question regarding since these decisions of teaching content classes in a particular institution may be part of a language policy in these institutions, what do you think the creators or administrators or the agents in charge of creating these policies or making these decisions regarding the teaching content classes in English or in a foreign language, what elements do they have to take into account to create these programs? And to finish, you say in your paper, I like this expression that you put in your paper, in this nomadic journey, I want to know about yourself. After all this process in your doctoral studies and in the process of you carrying out this research study, what has happened in your inner self as a person and as a science educator in this journey? Well, I don't have, but I may have some other questions, but I want to stop here and continue with the other.
Thank you, Dr. Nelly.
Thank you, Dr. Nelly. So, finally, our host examiner, Dr. Harold Andres Castañeda Peña. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you so much for the invitation to be the internal examiner of this dissertation. I want to say hello to Kevin and Nelly for being part of this panel of examiners. Thank you so much for that. And also my recognition to Carmen, Helena, and to Nate for the work that you guys did to support Sebastian's work. And Sebastian, I'm so happy that you are finally at this stage. I'm very proud of you because you are proof that district teachers, profesores del distrito, have the right and also the possibility to become doctors. And that's a political stance that we have in our program. We do not educate doctors for the elites. We educate doctors for our children who attend public schools. And I'm very happy that you, as a public school teacher, were able to go through this journey very successfully, although I had some recommendations, but very successfully in the sense that it is possible, and our program relies also in the desire that public school teachers had to become doctors in education, and you are showing that this could be a reality. So thank you so much for that, Sebas, and for all the things that you taught us as a public school teacher over the last few years in terms of your doctoral education. I'm very much in love with the topic of identity. That's also drives my research from a different angle, a different perspective. But identity is something that really concerns me in terms of education. And in that sense, you start your main theoretical presentation by stating that identity is something that is not fixed, but that's something that we already know. So my question for you is that after developing all this research process and being so entangled together with Angie, Lorena, and Ingrid, what else can we say about identity, especially in this context, that is new and that is different? And that's something that I probably might be a learning for all of us. And that's like one question that I had for you. I love very much the way that you presented your locus of enunciation. I think that we also have a locus of escuta or listening. And it's very interesting to know that you are a coffee lover, a music lover, traveler, and that you are a science lover. Of course, you are a science teacher, etc., and that you spend so many hours with Carmen Elena in a coffee shop drinking coffee and discussing this. We didn't get invited, but okay, that's something that we can discuss later on. But when we present our locus of enunciation, our locus of enunciation is also politically situated and localized. And then what is very political, or maybe it is not, about your locus of enunciation? What is what you strive for? What is what you are defending here? What makes your locus of enunciation political? Because of course your own personal histories and stories are entangled together there in that locus of enunciation. And I understand that. But again, what would be political about your locus of enunciation? Um, just like for the future, it was not very clear for me why you were presenting um, the epistemological perspective and the methodological perspective also when you were presenting the problem. It was not very clear to me the connection you were making there, but that's just for you to consider in the future. It's just like a a little note that I wanted to make. Carroll personally struggles again with the idea of continuities and discontinuities, because that takes me immediately to think of Foucault and some Foucauldian ideas in terms of how, subjectivities are constituted. And even though you mentioned that you draw some Foucauldian ideas, etc., it is not very clear to me, maybe to the audience it was, like why the continuities and discontinuities are part of your research process in terms of the findings and how you were presenting discontinuities and discontinuities in terms of the telling of the stories of your participants. That was a little bit unclear to me. And I think if you could probably expand on that, that would be really interesting. I agree with one question that Nelly made in terms of explaining like what would be like a sort of reconceptualization or understanding of bilingualism in Colombia, especially because you were making a lot of emphasis on the idea of Colombia being monolingual because Spanish spoken here, but you briefly mentioned, and I don't know if you are very aware of that. I think you are, that Colombia, rather than being a monolingual Spanish-speaking country, is a multilingual country. So that's a very interesting question to connect with all this discussion. And I think that you made like a brilliant explanation in terms of why you were using metaphors. I am very happy with that, because my serious doubt about that was that it was just like a sort of another interpretative framework imposed on the data by you. So I'm happy with the way you try to solve that. Because I think that's a good learning for everyone who is, into this sort of inquiry about identity, because metaphors really help us understand identities. And I think you did a great job there in that sense. I still had 2 minutes, so hold on a second. I'm just going through my notes right now. Yeah, I love the metamorphic stress because I'm always stressed, and that makes me change my identity. That was very brilliant. And as I think I said in a different forum, this idea of the homeostatic balance is so beautiful. It's like we tend to survive, and in order to survive as teachers, even us as doctoral teachers, with my team here, my colleagues here, we are trying to survive, trying to present like a sort of different way of becoming doctors in education, etc., which is very just to complement a little bit, Kevin's note that was very interesting. Is like it is striped against, North ideas or epistemological ideas coming from the North. So understanding this homeostatic balance was very important, and I think this is a very good, learning that we can get from the dissertation that Sebastían has defended today. And also that third idea of ecological resilience, because we are, resilience, not only ecologically, but from a human perspective, is something that we need to go to in order to survive as well. So I think the metaphors are very well chosen in that sense, because they really reflect the human aspect of identity from a biological perspective, but it's very human at the end of the day. And I'm very happy that you were able to do that, especially because that's very related to the idea of understanding these identities of content area teachers who had to teach in English, and we don't know anything about them, at least in the Colombian context. So, Sebastían, thank you so much again for your dissertation, and congratulations also to the advisors.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll, Dr. Nelly, and Dr. Haller for your comments and questions. So, Sebastían, you have 30 minutes, until
Okay.
30 minutes, to try to answer those insightful comments and questions.
Bueno, lo primero que tengo que decir es gracias por ver en mi trabajo cosas tan valiosas, porque creo que Gabriel García Márquez también lo decía, uno comparte su trabajo y luego las personas ven otras cosas hermosas que de pronto uno escribió, pero uno mismo no lo ve. So I wanna thank you all your comments of my defense of the document and the dissertation itself. Thank you to Dr. Carroll. Yes, I try to put in dialogue these two different fields: science education field and language education. And I believe in responding answering something that Dr. Nelly says. What it changed? I'm a science teacher, and I have all the comments of language teachers. So I make this discussion between my locus of enunciation and your locus of enunciation, and that's something great for me because I started learning things that I never thought in my life, in my undergraduate, even in the master degree. So it changed all my concepts of education. Then thank you for the question about AI. I have to say I'm no AI expert, but I have to recognize that it's a great tool. But for example, I think in Lorena when we were talking about her struggles in the pandemic and how she reinvented herself through the screens, and you make me think about what if in that stage in 2020 we could have this AI. It was maybe a great possibility for approaching to the kids or approaching new forms to teach. So that's the thing I have to say, because it's something related with one of the stories of my participants, and it's Lorena, and she said like it was very she confessed to me like it was very difficult using English without the physical contact, So maybe AI could help in that. Thanks to Dr. Nelly for her comments and questions. Yes, I was looking for. I worked with the concept of translanguaging by Garcia, but when we start looking the stories with CH and Dr. Rudolph, we start looking that there is not practices of translanguaging because it's the use of English, and it's for example I share with you one experience I had. One coordinator, and I was bilingual science teacher in a private school, and one coordinator would come to watch my class, and I started speaking English, and the kids they don't say nothing, and I said, okay, I want to clarify in Spanish, and I started talking about insects and talking about the relations between different insects and the flowers and stuff, and then all kids start raising their hands. So the coordinator comes to me after that and said like, yes, we are missing something when we change the code, and we are missing the importance of teaching science. And that's one of my critiques of the bilingual quotation marks in Colombia, because it privilegia el aprendizaje también de inglés than the exploring of science world, And it's so sad because when you are kids, or my kids, they really love science because they want to discover the world, And how to reconsider the bilingualism? I would say like maybe open some interests in clubs de intereses, but not the class itself, not because in the most of the private schools, it's science class, but it's not like something that the kids could choose. So, they are forced to learn science using English. So maybe a good idea could be like having science clubs in bilingual, in other languages, even trying to respond, answering to Harold too. Yes, I recognize my country as multilingual, but the bilingualism, sadly, is just understood by the use of English. It would be nice, but learning from Quechua, learning from other indigenous languages and their knowledges. And answering to Harold, yes, I have to recognize in my locus of enunciation, me as middle class man in Bogota, I'm not approaching these other possibilities of knowledge in science that our indigenous cultures have. And even I did not explore the other possibility identities of our indigenous um, sí, indigenous Colombian indigenous. So that you asked about what happens to me, and something part of my locus of initiation too. All my education was public since the school, since the elementary was public. And when I was working in private schools, I feel bad because I said like all Colombians pay for my education, and why I'm teaching for the Colombians who are in private schools. I mean, for me, being public science teacher, it's the most important thing because I'm trying to pay into the society the education they pay for me. So my position as a science teacher is something that really changed is how my commitment of being curious about the world and try to give that to my students in my classes. So that's a big change, and that's why I try to always learn. I believe when I'm finished my doctoral, when I'm finished this, I'm gonna continue studying because I recognize I don't know nothing, and I want to learn different things for teaching to my kids. Thanks, Harold, for seeing that, for seeing that we, as my partners in the doctoral program, we are, say, the public teachers, and I believe la educación tiene que ser pública, gratuita y de calidad. Yeah, and I'm doing this for my kids. I'm doing this not just for me, not just for my family, not just for my mom, for my father. Obviously, they are part of the process. They are part of the process, but I'm doing this for education. I'm trying to give them these dreams. Last year I was with the high school quotation marks kids, and they start telling me like now teacher, I wanna be a PhD someday. And I say like I did. So some teacher do the same thing to me. So I'm trying to reflect back that to my communities. Have this impact in my community. Um, that's is something that I was telling you about my locus of pronunciation. I have to recognize the limitations I have. Um, Situated in the city, situated in the bilingual education using English. Um, but I start recognizing that I criticize the use of English because I privilege the teaching science and the not the skills, the features that science could develop in a human being. But without that, without the understanding of science processes, we are taking off something very important to the kids. So that's why. Yes, I have to the continuities and discontinuities. I try to explain in a very complex relation between them because as I told you, it's not like different parts. But I want when I was approaching the stories, I want to look for the threads. No categories. No, I'm looking for the threads and how in the same story how they could change or not. You know, and that's all my comments of your questions, and thank you for doing all those questions because in that process enriching my rationale. And yes, I did like close reading of your comments in the document, and I try to solve some of those comments in the defense. And I want to say that all this is possible because our talks with Nat, because our talks with CH, because they way with con su increíble perspectiva del mundo, enriquecieron mucho mi perspectiva sobre esta investigación y me empoderaron, la verdad me empoderaron de este proceso. También creo que ser un profesor de ciencias en el campo de ELT Education habla mucho del proceso tan abierto que tiene nuestro énfasis. Creo que la verdad fue el único énfasis en el que sentí que podía desarrollar todo esto que estaba pensando y todo esto que quería desenvolver. Y es por la perspectiva que tuvieron Carmen, CH y Nat y la profesora Pilar y el profesor Harold y mis compañeros que también me recibieron con las manos abiertas. Y creo que eso me llevó challenging the borders, retar los bordes. Entonces, acá estamos. Muchas gracias por los comentarios.
Thank you, Sebastían, for those lovely closing words. Well, having into consideration that you didn't use plenty of time to answer all the questions, I would like to open the floor for our dear Carmen Helena and Nat to comment a few words about Sebastían's work and Sebastían himself as a researcher, as a student, as a person. So, Carmen Helena, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Pilar, for giving me this opportunity. First of all, I would like to extend a huge hug of congratulations to Sebastían. He's done an incredible job. He was very disciplined and very committed to what he was doing. I'm very proud to see him today defending his ideas. And thank you very much to Kevin and Nelly and Harold, of course, for their comments and for the feedback. And also to Billy and Harold for the feedback in the classes, for the discussions, because we were all the time, we were really a team within the classroom, and I think it helped us all grow. And thank you so much, Nat, for taking the time to be with us, to share with us, to discuss with us, for this lively conversation we had, because, Nat is on the other side of the world, so arranging the discussions was crazy, but he was always there, willing to spare some time to talk with us. So, and Sebastían, I am very happy that you decided to join the program. Sebastían was a student in the program that I was coordinating, but he was never my student. But then we luckily had this opportunity to work together, and Sebastían brought to the program not only his knowledge as a biology teacher. He is not from the ALT field. He is from the biology, for the science field, but he was so open to come to this field of the ALT, and he embraced all our ideas, and he studied so hard. But I think what I value most about Sebastían is his lovely personality. Sebastían has a huge heart. And I was telling earlier someone that Sebastían always looks to the shiny side of things. He's never negative. Everything for Sebastían is positive. And he brought this beautiful energy to our classroom, to this cohort. So I'm very happy, and I'm very lucky to have met you, Sebastían, and to have worked with you. All the best, because I know how committed you are, in your school with your kids. I love what you said about public education because I completely agree with you, and all this inspiring work you're doing with them. So thank you so much, Sebastían, for giving me the opportunity to walk this path with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, my dear CH. Now I would like to welcome to Nat. So you have been quite lucky, Sebastían, to really admire working with you and for you. Nat, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Well, I think the first thing I want to say is Sebastían is really a special guy. So incredibly talented, just not just intelligent, but wise, humble. And I think, you know, the key word for me with Sebastían was humble. So when we started the process, I think he felt some pressure to talk about things as an expert, right? Or to kind of present, for example, a literature review or post-structuralism in some sort of authoritative way, when he was just kind of in the beginning of really wrestling with what these things are. So for example, in the very beginning, I said, what do you mean bilingual? Right? What do you mean bilingual? And we talked about translanguaging. We talked about other things, you know. But he was always humble. He was always willing to learn and reflect, listen. And I think that's the characteristic of somebody who will be great. Maybe not extremely well known around the world, but that doesn't matter, because what matters to Sebastían the most is to be known and to be invested in his community, and to love and to serve with humility. And to me, this is the kind of person who should be known internationally, whose work should be well known. But I don't think that's a priority of his. I think his priority is to love and to serve and to invest and to transform the space that he'll be living in and working in and so on. So the second thing is, I think that we wrestled a lot with this word post-structural, right? Because some people speak about post-structuralism as if it's this one, you know, fixed idea, which is actually counter to what post-structuralism is. But I think through the process, what we realized is that Sebastían's ideas were unique and creative and innovative. For example, the use of metaphor in the process. And so we really had to wrestle with a few different things in terms of seeing, right? So for example, am I tending toward imposing ideas on the data? Or am I really trying to do something different with metaphor? And I was so happy to hear, Sebastían, how you talked about that today. I know we talked about it before the defense, but you know, it's very easy for that to appear to be an imposition of category on somebody, right? Or to essentialize kind of the dissertation, what's coming out of your data and whatnot. But I thought you did a really great job. So you're challenging what it means to do research in this way, through this, you know, through this lens, and that was exciting. And so I think this idea of being humble and being willing to revisit ideas and to wrestle with how you present what you're doing is really special. So that it was exciting to watch you grow. I always knew you're going to be successful. I just didn't know what the path would look like. So it's been an exciting thing to be part of your journey. Super proud and honored to be part of the process. So thank you very much. And congratulations again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Da. So we have reached the time for deliberation. So I want to ask Dr. Harold, Dr. Carroll, and Dr. Nat to go to a separate room. So give the floor to Professor Harold Andrés Castañeda Peña to read the assessment statement to conclude the session. Harito.
Okay. Thank you so much to Kevin and Nelly for the wonderful discussion we had. I'm going to switch into Spanish because I know there are parents in the audience who might want to listen to this as well. So, Sebastián, muchas gracias por tu disertación. Disfrutamos mucho leyéndola. Encontramos tu intervención final bastante política e interesante e inspiradora para el trabajo de muchas personas en el futuro. El panel de evaluadores está muy contento con el hecho de que tú, viniendo de un campo disciplinar distinto, hayas hecho la tarea que corresponde en un nuevo campo disciplinar y hayas logrado también esos diálogos interepistémicos. El jurado también está muy contento con el hecho de que hayas hecho una tesis que enmarcaste epistemológicamente en lo postestructural y fuiste leal, digamos, a esa parte de construcción. Y el jurado también está contento con el hecho de la forma en la cual tú estructuraste el texto, que pues es algo irreverente, pero al mismo tiempo es bastante eficiente del tipo de formación doctoral que tú tuviste. Entonces, basado en eso y pues muchos aspectos que discutimos, durante este tiempo me permito dar lectura oficial al acta. Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas, doctorado interinstitucional en educación, acta de defensa de tesis doctoral, acta T09-2025. El lunes 14 de julio de 2025, el doctor Kevin Sean Carroll, PhD in Language, Reading and Culture, por la Universidad de Arizona, Estados Unidos, y profesor e investigador de la Universidad de Puerto Rico, recinto Río Piedras, San Juan, Puerto Rico, por videoconferencia. La doctora Nelly Ospina, doctora en educación y profesora titular e investigadora en la Escuela de Idiomas como coordinadora del programa de articulación del inglés de la Universidad de Antioquia, por videoconferencia. Y el doctor Harold Castañeda Peña, doctor en educación, profesor e investigador del doctorado interinstitucional en educación de la Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas, en el énfasis de ELT Education por videoconferencia, se reunieron como panel evaluador de la tesis doctoral Weaving Teacher Identities, a Post-Structural Approach to Narratives in Bilingual Science Teachers, de autoría de Carlos Sebastían Figueroa Salamanca y dirigida por la doctora Carmen Helena Guerrero Nieto, profesora del doctorado interinstitucional en educación, sede Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas, en codirección ad honorem del doctor Nathanael Rudolph de la Universidad Kindai de Osaka, Japón. Luego de escuchar la defensa de la tesis doctoral en mención, los 3 jurados integrantes del tribunal otorgan la calificación de aprobada con distinción. Felicitaciones a nuestro nuevo doctor en educación de la Universidad Distrital. De verdad que es un honor. Sebastián, muchas felicidades. Muchas gracias a los 2 asesores. Y de nuevo quiero hacer énfasis en el hecho de que para nuestros profesores del distrito es posible llegar a una formación de alto nivel y es posible ser doctores, y tú eres un vivo ejemplo de ello, y pues nos sentimos también como programa muy felices y muy satisfechos de que un profesor del distrito demuestre que todo este sueño que nosotros tenemos como énfasis en ELT Education pionero en el país es posible. Entonces, muchas gracias también a ti, Sebastián, de nuevo por las enseñanzas que nos dejaste. No es fácil venir de un campo para otro campo y para nosotros fue maravilloso tenerte como estudiante y ahora pues decirte colega, doctor, y pues bienvenido a este mundo académico de los doctores en nuestra universidad en Colombia, y pues que todo esto sea de un gran beneficio para tus niños, como lo dijiste, y para todas las generaciones de profesores que probablemente vayas a educar en el futuro también. Entonces, muchísimas gracias. Pili.
Muchísimas gracias y felicitaciones, Sebastián. Reconocer que Sebastián termina su doctorado en la ventana de 5 años. Entonces es posible hacer un doctorado con los tiempos siendo tan disciplinado como eres. Thank you so much to Nat, a la doctora Carmen Helena, al doctor Carroll, a la doctora Nelly, por haber aceptado esta investigación, a escucharlos a ustedes el día de hoy. Fue un aprendizaje también para todos nosotros y gracias a la audiencia que siguió esta transmisión. Sebastián, tiempo de celebrar.
No, muchas gracias.